Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is just absolutely fascinating. We're going to look at how an ancient, almost poetic philosophy perfectly maps onto the hard, modern cognitive science of optimal performance. We are talking about how to literally flow like water, both as a leader in your day-to-day life and deep within your own mind. So, let's get right into it. You know, the legendary martial artist Bruce Lee famously said, "Be like water, making its way through cracks. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water." And honestly, this isn't just a cool line from a movie. It sets up a really profound metaphor for us today. True leadership and true personal mastery, they don't come from applying rigid, unbreakable force to every single problem you face. Instead, they require absolute adaptability. You have to fit the container you're poured into. And this brilliantly illustrates how top-tier leaders operate out there in the real world. Flowing water does not compete to go first. Now, this was the guiding philosophy of Kim Yong-hwan, the former chairman of South Korea's NH Financial Group. As a financial strategist, he lived through some of the most intense turning points in Korean finance. By holding firm to his core principles while responding flexibly to his environment, what he liked to call taking smart adventures, Kim successfully navigated massive financial disasters like the Kiko currency option derivative crisis. He didn't just rigidly force a single solution on the problem. No, he adapted to the cracks in the crisis. So what happens when we compare rigid leadership to fluid leadership in a broader framework? Well, the differences are pretty staggering. Rigid leaders rely on strict rules, and they often fail spectacularly in unpredictable post-crisis environments. But fluid leaders, they constantly adapt their style to fit the situation. A perfect example of this is Jason Lamb, a strategist for the U.S. Space Force. During a deployment in Afghanistan, he led a really diverse team. In fact, one of his team members later told him they couldn't even figure out his exact leadership style. Because sometimes he was directive, other times he was inclusive, sometimes he was super hands-on, and other times he just delegated the whole thing. Lamb's success wasn't an accident. That was fluid leadership in action. Section 1. The psychology of flow. Let's dig into the cognitive science and see how we actually achieve this fluidity. To really get this, we have to look at flow. In psychology, flow is defined as the mental state in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus, full involvement, and enjoyment. The Hungarian-American psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi codified this concept way back in 1975. And what actually sparked his research is pretty wild. He was studying artists who became so intensely absorbed in their painting that they would completely disregard their need for food, water, or even sleep. They were just entirely carried away by the current of their work. Okay, so the secret key to the cognitive mechanics of flow lies in this exact number, 110. The human brain can only purposefully process about 110 bits of information per second. To put that into perspective for you, just listening to me speak right now and decoding my words takes about 40 to 60 bits per second. So when you enter a state of intense flow, the task at hand completely consumes that 110-bit capacity. You literally do not have the leftover mental bandwidth to process hunger, fatigue, or even the passing of time. This total cognitive absorption creates what we can call the tunnel of high performance. Formula One racing legend Ayrton Senna described this perfectly. During qualifying for the 1988 Monaco Grand Prix, he was driving a massive 2 seconds faster than anyone else on the track. Think about that. He later explained that he wasn't even driving the car consciously anymore. He had entered this subconscious, instinctual dimension where his actions and awareness just merged into one. He described it as feeling like he was in a tunnel, and that right there, that is the ultimate flow state. Section 2. The recipe for flow. Finding the balance. So how do we actually get there? Well, it turns out it's a highly measurable formula. Based on Csikszentmihalyi's experience fluctuation model, there's a very clear relationship between your skill level and the challenge you're facing. Look at it this way. If you have low skill, but you're facing a high challenge, you're going to feel anxiety. If you have high skill, but the challenge is super low, you're just going to get bored. But when you match a high level of skill with a high level of challenge, boom, that is where flow happens. Building on that idea, researchers have actually identified 3 specific conditions that absolutely must be met to trigger a flow state. First, the activity has to have clear goals and a sense of progress. Second, it requires clear and immediate feedback so you can adjust your performance in real time. And third, like we just talked about, there has to be a balance between the perceived challenge and your perceived skills. And here's a really vital tip. If you're working on something and you start to feel bored because the challenge has dropped off, you actively need to increase the difficulty to force yourself back into the zone. Section 3. flow in the workplace. Team dynamics. We know how this works for a painter or a race car driver, but let's see what happens when we scale this concept up. So I want to pose this question directly to you. Can a group experience flow together? Like, can a whole team get into the zone simultaneously? The scientific answer is a resounding yes. It's known as team flow or group cohesion, and it introduces a whole new set of really fascinating variables. This group state relies on something called interpersonal synchronization. Think of a group of jazz musicians or drummers binding the pocket together. They aren't just individually in flow, they are in a mutual flow. And what's totally mind-blowing about the research here is that when a group simultaneously reports being in a flow state, researchers have actually tracked similarities in their cardiovascular triggers. Their bodies are quite literally synchronizing to the same rhythm. So the crucial point here is, how can managers actively create this for their teams? Well, it's by applying Csikszentmihalyi's principles at an organizational level. First, you need to establish crystal clear goals for all tasks, so the team knows exactly what success looks like. Second, provide immediate feedback. Please don't wait for an annual review to tell someone how they're doing. And third, match your employees' capacity with the right opportunity. If you give a highly skilled worker a mundane task, they're going to be bored. If you give a total novice a massive project, they'll be anxious. You have to balance it out to unlock peak productivity and team morale. Section 4, the dark side of flow, captives of order. Now, as much as we've praised this concept today, we definitely need to talk about the potential downsides of being too immersed in this state. Csikszentmihalyi himself actually issued a warning about becoming what he called captives of order. Because flow feels so incredibly good, it perfectly organizes the mind and produces these intense feelings of enjoyment, it can actually become addictive. People can become so reliant on these perfectly structured challenges that when they're finally forced to step outside the zone, they really struggle to cope with the messy, unstructured ambiguities of everyday life. You don't want to be so fluid in your work that you just freeze up when real life happens. To combat that trap, we need to develop an autotelic personality. Autotelic comes from the Greek words for self and goal. People with this mindset actively seek out challenges and flow experiences because they are driven by intrinsic curiosity. They aren't doing it for the external reward, the money or the fame. They find the intrinsic reward in the journey itself, constantly balancing their skills against whatever random challenges the world throws at them. Which brings me to a question I want to leave you with today. Are you cultivating an autotelic mindset to flow like water through your own challenges? Are you just passively reacting to your environment, waiting for the next crisis to hit? Or are you actively shaping your skills and challenges to achieve optimal flow? The science shows us the formula, and the philosophy gives us the mindset. The rest? Well, that's entirely up to you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time.